Even adults can confuse these terms. We think we understand, but sometimes these terms are merged in unintentional ways. How many times have we heard, "That's not fair"? Haven't we all said it at some slight we experienced? We can be pretty sure that every time these words were uttered, there was some reasonable explanation of why it went the way. Does fair mean equal? Fairness isn't about everything being equal, but more about leveling the playing field so people get what they need when they need it. What I have thought about and will share with you are my opinions and observations. Prior to moving back to Illinois, I had a conversation with a person I respect. In the midst of multiple subjects that came up, this person just flat out said that all people are not equal. Generally, this person felt that we could not achieve equality because some were not as smart as others. We can argue all we'd like about intelligence, but I'm not sure that was the meaning. I believe the statement was more to the notion that all do not deserve to have equality due to some innate flaw within themselves. I really had some restless nights after that and was motivated to share my thoughts with the UU congregation that we moved from in Pensacola, Florida. So yes, you get to hear my repeat thoughts, but with some additional words, so much has happened since that time. Our Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The men who wrote these words were white men who owned land, landed gentry. These thoughts did not include Native people, slaves, women, or the poor. Since July 4th, 1776, our country has had many changes. We've not yet achieved the high goal of allowing all people equality. Unitarian Universalists have 7 principles, which BUC shares on the back of our order of service. These are reminders of what we affirm and promote. The first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and the second principle of justice, equity, and compassion in human relations appear to me to be the most relevant to today's topic. UUs become aware of issues because we are involved in our communities and work to right the wrongs. I want to explore where we fall short as a nation and what we can do to keep our eye on the prize. The truth is, every person is not equal. Some are tall, some short, some blue-eyed, others another, fat, thin, big feet, tiny hands, on and on with physical differences. Our differences make us who we are. How else would we recognize someone if we didn't have differences? Our legal system, our education, our infrastructure, housing, medical, mental health, and our areas where fairness and equity has failed. We are now returning to what may be called normal after 2+ years of COVID and all its tragedy. So many households affected by illness and death. Here we are, one of the richest countries in the world, but have 1 million deaths due to COVID. Could this be due to inadequate health care as far as access and distribution? Of course, there are political reasons for our failure, but our nation just was not prepared. I recall in the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was praising essential workers. Who were these people who worked on the front lines battling this crisis? We know Many were healthcare workers, doctors and nurses, but also this includes those who are custodians, food preparation, childcare, and more. Those who did not have the luxury of going home and continuing to work isolated from others. All the headlines were about these brave essential workers. They deserve better pay, better working conditions, better health care. Did that happen? I guess we could argue that some businesses raised pay or may have offered hazard pay, but what's happening now? Employers have increased wages because there are fewer workers willing to continue the low pay, low benefits, low esteem of their work. The fair versus equal collide. A fair living wage is not addressed, and those who can work remotely continue to do so. Congress has done nothing about raising the minimum wage. Will the private sector slide back once the memory of the pandemic fades? What is a fair wage for an unskilled worker? I don't know this answer, but taking advantage of the unskilled to keep them in poverty is not a path to a vibrant society. We can and must continue to work to lift up this issue and make the powers that be uncomfortable. In the area of juvenile criminal justice, young people have their entire lives upended because of a silly prank where they end up with criminal record that holds them back in future opportunities. We learned that in Escambia, Florida, Escambia County, Florida, where the UU Church is located, the schools were calling the police due to misbehavior of students. The students were then taken to court and would end up with criminal record that would follow them beyond school and limit ability to be employed. There is a coalition of churches in the community that's working with the state's attorney to change this with issuing civil citations. The state's attorney for the county has agreed to work with the police in the civil citation method where if the juvenile has not had any further interaction, the citation is removed and there's no criminal history. Cook County has something similar to this, but some school districts are still calling the police to handle misbehavior rather than handling it within their ability. Calling the police results in ticketing. The tickets have various fines, but it puts a financial burden on the family. A recent article in the Chicago Tribune authored by Armando Sanchez titled "The Price Kids Pay" highlights this issue. There's a component of race in this system where people of color are more often ticketed. It astounds me that the legal system is so harsh towards minors. The school to prison pipeline is alive and well. When our daughter was in high school, you'll be surprised, more than 30 years ago, she was caught drinking alcohol in a park near our home. There were several others with her. Anyway, we had to go to jail to pick her up, and then we all returned later to the court for a hearing. She and her friends were given community service, and that was the end of it. There was no fine, nothing more. Would that happen today? I can say the teens were all very humbled by the entire ordeal, but that's not the point. Now I think if those teens were not white, the whole affair would have been a different outcome. Several years ago, the UUA chose the book Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson as its common read. It's a compelling book and looks at the harm done by convicting innocent people. The time spent away from family and loss of productive life. This book highlights Alabama, but we all know that this isn't only an Alabama problem. The crimes committed against innocent people seem to continue to bubble to the surface. The cost to society is immense, and yet there's no amount of money paid that will get their lives back. In addition to Mr. Stevenson's work for innocence, he has also built the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. The museum provides history of slavery to modern life in these United States. It also identifies those who have been lynched without trial. The tragedy occurred in every state. It's a sobering experience. If you have the opportunity to go, you must see it. Martin Luther King said, "We have deluded ourselves into believing the myth that capitalism grew and prospered out of the Protestant ethic of hard work and sacrifice. The fact is that capitalism was built on the exploitation and suffering of Black slaves and continues to thrive in the exploitation of the poor, both Black and white, here and abroad," end quote. The housing problem in the United States is in crisis. It's a downward spiral for our nation. There are so many factors to the problem that begins with low-paying wages that cannot meet the cost of an apartment, let alone buying a home. Banks and the federal government created redlining. There was a deliberate plan to not loan in certain areas because it was assumed that people would not pay. This was just assumed, not by any actual knowledge, but pure prejudice. Because of segregation, the VA loan benefit for home loans was not available to Black veterans. Also, the GI Bill. The same occurred with farmers. Black farmers were not able to access loans that white farmers could. Why? I grew up on the far south side of Chicago, Roseland. It was a middle class area. After MLK's death, white flight occurred in the area. Realtors would call in the evening and give updates of where people were moving. So there'd be a late night call with a voice of, "They're moving to 107th," or whatever landmark affected the white homeowner. It was pure scare tactics, and it just devastated the area. Afterward, the area became one of the highest percentage of HUD foreclosures. It's just awful. This is not fair or equal when the cards are against you from the get-go. The area really has not recovered. When people are given no opportunity, it gives them no hope. Voting is another area where states are trying to limit the ability to vote. After the last election, many states changed the rules to protect the vote. Isn't that a term, a clever term, to limit the ability to vote? There's more identification needed, less time and places to cast your ballot. Mail-in ballots were available during the pandemic, but now not so much. In 2013, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. Their decision was gut-wrenching, but now this term, they did decide against the Alabama redistricting map. That was a big surprise. I believe the map was so obvious of how the legislators drew it that even the court couldn't agree to follow it. I believe the states will take another stab at accomplishing what they want, but they'll be more clever in their game. The current makeup of the court has made it more difficult to respect their judgment. The decision against affirmative action in college admissions is really going to challenge so much more than students. Somehow the court has magically waved a wand and there will be colorblindness in the admission process. Not only are the 6 judges living, I know I said 6 and I meant 6, so just so you know. They're living in a privileged world, but somehow not in any world where reality is recognized. Up until now, we on the progressive spectrum could count on the courts to protect our world from bottoming out. Now we don't have that net. There's no guarantee anymore the federal judiciary will protect anyone except corporations who have now become people. What about taxes? Our tax system allows the richest people to pay the least percentage of tax. The laws and regulations are created to protect them and shield their money. I don't begrudge those who have more money than I, but I do begrudge that the wealthy can write off their yacht, but I cannot write off my John boat. Climate change affects all of us, but not equally. The poor suffer more and will continue to suffer the result. Our recent spate of poor air quality is a wake-up call to all of us. The earth is getting warmer, and we are running out of time to reverse. Not too long ago, California was on fire. The smoke and haze was everywhere. So how many of you knew it was happening, but that was somewhere else? Now it's here. If you are fortunate enough to remain inside, great. But as with the pandemic, there are many who have to work outside or be where they are not sheltered. Most red states refused to sign on to the Affordable Care Act. By accepting the health care money, the citizens would have had affordable health care and the states would have received money to help. Instead, out of spite, they've reduced available health care. Now another war against society, the war on women and inequity toward them. So much to touch on, including lack of opportunity in business world, inequality and compensation for equal work, and control of healthcare. After the Dobbs decision was announced, many states enacted laws to limit access to healthcare for women as well as LGBTQ+ citizens. Somehow banning books is honoring parental rights, but providing health care for your children is not. Legislators are creating laws that harm rather than help citizens. Our immigration system is in a shambles because Congress cannot get their act together. Migrants are being shipped from Florida and Texas. Truth is, this is inconvenient. But we have witnessed the hard work of so many in this community who have stepped into the role to help, working to gather food, clothing, housing, and so much more. Our first and second principles are alive and well at BUC and witnessed by the community. There was a TV series still available called A Small Light, where the character Otto Frank says, if we turn away people we can help, we become people we don't recognize. Our liberal religion of Unitarian Universalism has been at the forefront of protecting those who do not have the power to protect themselves. The truth is, we are all created equal, but differently. We are all in this together. We must continue to work toward a fairer society. We are people who raise awareness to the issues. We just don't talk about things, we act. Silence is not our method. We are aware of wrongs and speak up. Nothing is impossible. Working toward creating healthy communities, fairer immigration system, protecting the planet, and so much more is who we are. Not the only ones working towards these honorable goals, but working with others to make it happen. We can pick that scab until someone pays attention to and tries to stop the pain. It is our duty to continue to work to make it so that all people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. May it be so.